William Henry Harrison's men built Fort Harrison, a stockade from the War of 1812, in October 1811 on high land, with a view of the Wabash River on a section of what is now the city of Terre Haute, Indiana. Harrison used it as a staging area to set up camp for his troops a month before the Battle of Tippecanoe. The siege of Fort Harrison in September 1812, the first major American victory in the War of 1812, took place at the fort and was a well-known engagement. As the line shifted westward in 1818, the fort was abandoned. General William Henry Harrison's troops camped on the high grounds of Terre Haute and built a fort with a view of the Wabash River in 1811 as he marched his army north from Vincennes to confront the Indians at the Battle of Tippecanoe. Harrison had long argued for the construction of a fort at the key spot. The fort guarded Vincennes, the Indiana Territory capital downstream, and the Army's supply routes. The location was about 2 miles from the wee town of Tippecanoe and was situated at the northern fringe of Terre Haute in what is now Vigo County, Indiana. Originally known as Camp Bataille des Illinois, it was said to have been the site of a major battle involving the Illiniwek. In honor of General Harrison, Major Joseph Hamilton Davis suggested renaming the stockade Fort Harrison. When the fort was completed on October 28, 1811, the post was surrounded by a 150-foot, 46-meter stockade. Harrison led his force to the Tippecanoe battlefield, where it faced an army under the command of Tenskwatawa, the Shawnee prophet. After departing from the fort and a small garrison commanded by Colonel James Miller, Harrison rewarded Captain Josiah Snelling for his success at Tippecanoe by leaving him in charge of Fort Harrison when the troops returned. The fort was commanded by Snelling from November 11, 1811 to May 1812. The New Madrid earthquakes of 1811–12 rocked the fort that winter. Later, Snelling was sent to Fort Detroit. After the outbreak of the War of 1812, Captain Zachary Taylor, future President of the United States, was ordered by Harrison to leave Fort Knox and assume command of Fort Harrison. The United States had suffered a series of defeats immediately after war was declared at the hands of the British, Canadians, and Indians. These victories helped motivate other native tribes to take up campaigns against remote American outposts. The period from September 4th to September 12th, 1812, was known as the Siege of Fort Harrison. It was defeated by a joint Native American army close to present-day Terre Haute, Indiana, by an outnumbered American force stationed within the fort. During the War of 1812, it was the first American land victory. A group of Miami landed on September 3, 1812, and informed Captain Taylor that a sizable Native American army would soon assault them. Despite hearing gunfire that night, Taylor was reluctant to send out a scout team. There were only 50 men in his garrison, and only 15 of them were active due to illness. When a crew was sent out in the morning, they found the remains of the Doyle brothers, 2 white settlers. Following the boys' burial, the group returned to Fort Harrison. Captain Taylor prepared for the anticipated assault with his 15 capable men and around 5 healthy settlers. 20 individuals were given 16 shots to shoot. On September 4th, a group of 600 warriors from the Shawnee, Kickapoo, Winnebago, and Potawatomi tribes, led by Chief Pacoy Shekan, and the Weah, led by War Chief Stone Eater, came toward Fort Harrison. Under the pretext of a ceasefire, a group of 40 warriors led by Kickapoo Chief Namatoha arrived and requested to negotiate with Taylor the following morning. The Indian troops withdrew to camp for the night after Taylor's consent. A warrior crept up and lit the blockhouse on fire that night. The 600-member Indian war party stormed the fort's west flank as the sentries opened fire on the arsonist. Taylor gave a few defenders and the fort's physician orders to put out the fire. The whiskey stored in the blockhouse, which was connected to the barracks, quickly caught fire and spread out of control. 2 of his healthy men left the fort, and Taylor acknowledged in his report that the situation was hopeless. The captain gathered a bucket brigade to combat the fire before it damaged the fort's picket walls, warning the fort that Taylor never surrenders. To fill buckets faster, one lady, Julia Lambert, even lowered herself into the fort's well. One benefit of the fire was that it brightened the night, making the attackers visible. The garrison temporarily filled in the 20-foot, 6-meter hole created by the fire with a 5-foot, 1.5-meter breastwork. The few members of the garrison who remained managed to repel the invasion by furiously retaliating against the Indians. While the healthy soldiers worked to repair the hole in the fort's walls, the surviving invalids were armed to maintain defense. By the morning of September 5th, the fort had been restored. The Indian troops slaughtered local farm animals in view of the fort and retreated just out of firing range. Meanwhile, the soldiers and residents within the fort feared famine after losing much of their food in the fire and only having a few bushels of maize. Colonel William Russell was traveling through Vincennes with a regiment of regular army and a detachment of rangers to meet with Illinois Territory Governor Ninian Edwards when word of the siege reached Vincennes. Colonel Russell's battalions marched to Fort Harrison's assistance alongside the 7th Infantry Regiment and the local militia. On September 12th, the Indian force left after more than 1,000 troops arrived from Vincennes. However, in what became known as the Attack at the Narrows in present-day Sullivan County, Indiana, a supply train that was following Colonel Russell was attacked the following day. A group of 13 troops led by Lieutenant Fairbanks of the 7th Infantry escorted a supply cart full with meat and wheat when the relief force arrived at Fort Harrison. A Potawatomi war group attacked the supply wagon on September 13, 1812, along a portion of the path called the Narrows, which is close to present-day Fairbanks, Indiana, and has several ravines that are tributaries of Prairie Creek. The draft horses fled with the wagon in a fright as the ambush was started. Private Edward Perdue and John Black, the wagoneer, were the only 2 soldiers to return to Fort Knox alive. But Perdue was released because of his serious injuries. Fortunately for the 2 survivors, the fugitive supply wagon was pursued by the Potawatomi. A number of Potawatomi warriors had been killed or injured, while the United States had lost all the rations and 11 men. A second column of 2 supply wagons and 15 soldiers under Lieutenant Richardson set out from Vincennes 2 days after the first wagon, following the same trail, and unaware of the fate of the first. When the Potawatomi learned that a second supply train was approaching, they set up the same ambush. On September 15th, after the initial attack, Richardson realized he was outmanned and ordered a retreat. The wagons were left behind to be plundered, which may have saved the lives of the retreating soldiers. Even so, 7 men had been killed and another had been badly wounded. A few days after finding the deaths, a battalion led by Major McGarry went to Fort Harrison to report the attacks to Colonel Russell, and, more crucially for the half-starved survivors there, the missing supply trucks. On September 16th, in what became known as the Lamont Prairie Massacre, the Potawatomi group departed the Narrows and assaulted the home of a resident named Isaac Hudson. His wife and 4 children were slaughtered while Hudson was abroad. The Battle of Fort Harrison is considered the first land victory of the United States during the War of 1812. The same day, General Harrison's forces relieved Fort Wayne, which eliminated the last Indian threat to Indiana Territory for the remainder of the war. Colonel Russell proceeded to Illinois with the Indiana Rangers and led an operation against the Kickapoo on Peoria Lake in reprisal for the Pigeon Roost Massacre and the attack on Fort Harrison. Zachary Taylor was brevet promoted to major for his work at Fort Harrison. Following the establishment of peace in Indiana Territory, the fort was abandoned in 1818 after being rebuilt in 1815-16 with blockhouses at each corner. Fort Harrison was controlled by Zachary Taylor and William Henry Harrison, which is why historians from Indiana subsequently called it the Fort of 2 Presidents. The fort's graveyard was found in 1970, 200 yards south of the previously thought location of the fort. A man discovered Lieutenant Fairbanks's sword lodged in a wood many years after the battle. The Indiana State Museum received it. The genealogy of detachments from the former 7th Infantry that fought at Fort Harrison is continued by 2 modern infantry battalions of the regular army, 1 in F and 2 in Fe.